Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regular council afternoon meeting of Monday, April the 26th. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel, youtube.com District of Summerland. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. Watch the meeting live or recorded at the Summerland YouTube channel, youtube.com, District of Summerland live or recorded. Request to speak during the meeting. Those who have not registered in advance but wish to speak during the public comment opportunities may connect to the meeting by calling the meeting conference line at 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. After I have provided everybody who has pre-registered with an opportunity to comment, the floor will be open to those on the conference line. Director of Corporate Services, are there any late items to introduce?
There are no late items, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask someone in council to bring forward the agenda? Councillor Holmes and Councillor Van Elfen, all in favor? Okay, thank you. And on to adoption of the minutes for the regular afternoon council meeting of April the 12th. Anything out of line there? Councillor Van, no, okay. So I'll ask for someone to move that, please. Councillor Van Elfen, seconded by Councillor Holmes. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, on to delegations. 5.1, the 2021 BC Bike Race. And this is Dean Payne and Jeff Stromgren from BC Bike Race who are going to join us from Zoom or via Zoom.
Hello.
Please go ahead when you're ready.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name's Jeff. Dean, you're on mute, so you can unmute yourself there. And I'm going to share the PowerPoint presentation that we've brought along with us.
Can you make sure your mic is on?
Mine's on. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Okay, perfect. Go ahead there, Dean.
Thanks for your time. And we're here from the BC Bike Race to request endorsement and support of the 14th annual BC Bike Race. And
just having a little bit of technical difficulty. If you could just hold your presentation for one moment.
Okay.
Thank you. can you try one more time?
Okay, hi there.
Hold on a second there, Dean. I'm just gonna reshare it just in case that was the. I'm gonna go to here. Share that from beginning.
Okay. Thanks for your time. And Jeff and I are here to seek council's endorsement of the BC Bike Race for October 4th or 5th, 2021, pending PHO approval and assistance from the district staff with requirements for planning and support to do one stage of 6 days of the BC Bike Race. So the BC Bike Race, we've had 13. Last year we were postponed because of COVID. Typically we're an international event that has over 13 years seen 52 countries represented, and approximately 625 participants on average from about 30 countries a year. And the average age is between 39 and 41. There's some other statistics here just about our demographic, but they're mountain bikers, and they're seeking the ultimate single track experience with us. And of course, for 2021, we'll likely only have Canadians, and it'll be a much smaller field of approximately 150 to 200 riders. Why we are looking at Summerland as a potential host for one day is that, in fact, your trails are world-class for mountain bikers. Mountain bikers love single track, and there's some mountain bike trails that are built by mountain bikers in and around Summerland. We have a tentative or initial endorsement from the mountain bike community and the Penticton and Area Cycling Association. And we also think that as a staging area to host an outdoor activity, the rodeo grounds are a great staging area for a mountain bike race and access to trails. So we are looking at day 3 of a 6-day event. And we would only do the one day in Summerland, approximately 40 kilometers, some trails on Conkle, some trails on Cartwright, start, finish at the rodeo grounds, and 3 to 5 hours of trail use for that day. And we're looking at Tuesday, October 5th, TBD, and approximately, I'm going to say 150 to 250 riders. It's in that ballpark. I think, Jeff, you might be able to speak to this slide.
Thanks, Dean. My job with the BC Bike Race is to work with landowners and trail organizations and people on the ground to establish the course that we'll be using. And we've been doing a lot of research and connection building in the community with people that are keen and understand what we're asking. And we kind of came up with a few kind of examples here on the screen of the kind of places and trails. And I think the important part here that we wanted to illustrate is that we come looking to use the trails that the locals ride, because that's kind of the brand we sell, is that we want the people that come to visit here, whether they're coming from Port Moody, British Columbia, or around the world eventually, or just down from Kelowna, we want to show them what the locals are riding and give them a great experience on the bike. So we've got a few different ways of going about this. And the people that we're working with are telling us already there's some great changes you can make to the way you've designed your initial thoughts. And so we'll go through that process over the next few months, pending your approval and everybody else is getting on board with us.
Okay, so we wanted to keep it pretty streamlined for our request. And I think I'd add to that that the 2 trail networks are across each side of the valley. we try to minimize impact to the community. We're not looking to race through the streets or block off traffic or anything like that. The places that the riders would get a time is on the trail, and we could use chip timing to do that. And we feel like adopting a format in racing called the enduro style is there's sections that are not timed. In other words, if transferring stages between Conkle and Cartwright, it'd be an opportunity to ride at a leisurely pace. We see stopping at Fall Festival aid station with fresh produce that's picked right in that time in early October. And, choosing a route through the community between the mountains that would hopefully garnish a little bit of community enthusiasm and, that kind of thing where we would work with the community to, have you design where you would like us to go or not. So the way we work is really arm in arm with the local bike clubs and the 18 communities we've worked in over our history. And we just always defer and take the lead to the local bike clubs, who are the volunteer groups that work on the ground. We often and will always have a donation to the local bike club to help in their maintenance of their trails as well. And we work with the bike club to choose trails that are sustainable, that, we're not going to wreck trails, and work with the bike club to decide the route in the end. So that's our ask specifically. And I think we would welcome any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Council, I'll look at the people here in the room first. Councillor Holmes.
Okay. Thank you very much. This sounds really exciting. It'd be a great event for this community for sure. I just have a question regarding the trails. The municipality, we don't really maintain those trails at all. They're kind of maintained by the local riders, and I don't know how organized it is, but I'm just wondering if you would plan to come out ahead of time to inspect the trails and do any repairs that might be needed.
Mm-hmm. I'll take that one, Dean. We work what'll eventually be all year round with our trail stewardship partners, whomever that is in the communities that we visit. We've been forming on-the-ground partnerships in Summerland already because we had to do our homework to find out if this was a place that we could operate under this business model, which works really well here, as we've said. Yes, the answer is yes. We'll work with those groups. We sometimes fund projects that they have in mind to keep the trails at mind. We sometimes fund work days where our people come out to visit them or they bring their volunteers together to do the work. Mountain biking is a very unique sport in that we build our own arenas. We build our own soccer pitches. We play in the mountains, and we've learned how to help carve the mountains into an arena and a soccer pitch for mountain biking. And we support those groups that do that locally year round.
Thank you. Could I ask you to stop sharing your screen, and then I can see the tiles a bit better? There. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Traynor, thank you.
Hi, Dean and Jeffrey. Thanks for your presentation. I did talk to a couple of my friends that are in the Summerland Mountain Biking Club, and they were really supportive of this. And they did say that you guys talked to them already, and they thought that it would be a really good event for Summerland. So that was really good to hear. My question to you is, what exactly do you see yourselves needing from staff to help support this event?
I think, thank you for the question, and that's good to hear. We really, I think, just help guide us through your process, whatever that looks like. We've had really good discussions with Laurie Mullen, and so hosting an event is often, many layers, and as much as we like to simplify things, we just always take the lead and guidance. Every town that we operate in is unique. So, we just like to make sure we're doing everything the right way, especially in the first year. So I think, I think our ask, we're really aware we don't want to burden the communities with more work, and we want this to be an easy experience. So the good thing with mountain biking is we're often just in the forest on our bikes on established trails that the local mountain bikers have take great pride in, and that's really I think if working with the community in the work we do, the most of the work is with the volunteer mountain bike clubs, and all the clubs are a little bit unique in their own way. So it's quite minimal of what we're really asking for. We're not asking for any funding or anything like this. We really, as we understand it, the rodeo grounds are a public asset that Summerland owns, and we think it's a great showcase venue. Easy parking, it's close to the trails, it's got it's a really it's a unique place. It's something that mountain bikers I think appreciate, that type of setting. So I think we'd be rolling up our sleeves with the bike club to really work with them on the route that they feel is best to showcase the trails they want to showcase, and then working with them to get the trails ready.
One of the really interesting things about our client is they don't do this to win prize money. If they complete the BC bike race, they get a belt buckle, and it fits right in with the motif of what's going on in the Okanagan.
Great, that sounds good. You'll probably have fun explaining the names of our trails on Conkle. They're a little different.
We've seen.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question.
Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Barkwell or Carlson? Nope. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, hello.
Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah. My question is more for Lori, Director of Recreation. Is this time to address things with her, or just the presenters?
Thank you, Councillor Barkwell. I'll just check. Any more questions for the presenters, the delegation? Okay, please go ahead, Councillor Barkwell.
Okay, I don't know what part of the trails are through a park, but I understand a lot of those trails are through park, a Summerland park. And, it just doesn't, it isn't right that people can arbitrarily make new trails, cut new trails and stuff through a park. We should be having a plan for the development of that park. There's conflict between users as a mountain biker flies down a trail and figures that they own it when there's a walker on it with their dog or something, and because they built it. But it's a Summerland park, and I think that at some point here we got to get control of things. Are there going to be more trails built for this facility or this race, or is it just going to use the existing trails and go from there?
I'll just interject there. Sorry, Councillor Barkwell. Yeah, no, our MO is not to build new trails or disturb any undisturbed ground. The idea is that we came to Summerland because there's an inventory of trails that are available and built by locals and embraced by locals, and we support the locals to and help them maintain their relationships at home too. They do a lot of hard work trying to build up their own sport locally and maintain their own relationships, and we want to support those relationships. And so, thanks for your concern about that. It's something that's important to us as well.
Please go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Barkwell. Yeah, so as Jeffrey mentioned, it's using existing trails. There would need to be some education around when the race is happening so that there wouldn't be conflict and appropriate signage and information going out on the trail. But just a matter of note to council is the majority of the routes that are being proposed here for this race are on Crown and private land and a portion of Summerland district land. So the organizers are aware that they would need to get the permissions from the Crown and for the private landowners to use those trails prior to moving forward. Similar to the Test of Humanity race, which majority of that race happens on private lands, they're looking at similar trails there on Cartwright. So just a heads up on that.
Okay, so if there aren't any further questions, then I guess we receive this for information and an indication of directing staff to work with the BC bike race. Okay, would someone like to bring that resolution forward, please? Councillor Traynor, seconder, Councillor Van Elfen, and any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Great, that's carried unanimously. Thank you so much, you two. And
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing this potential opportunity to Summerland. I really appreciate, and as you can hear from Councillor Traynor, others in the community are already appreciating the opportunity to highlight some of the recreational activities that we have already on the ground, so to speak. So thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, now we have the first of two public comment opportunities. I don't see anyone on the speakers list. No. Okay. So we'll move on to the first of our business items. 7.1 Canyon View Road water main options. And this is for our fire chief, is that right?
Madam Mayor, it's
No.
Glenn here, but I can't speak to the water main update.
No.
I believe that's Kristen.
Well, no wonder I'm looking at the wrong agenda. So 7.1, Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, Emergency Operations Center and Training. Now over to you, Chief Noble. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I can speak to this one. So before council is a recommendation from staff to support the Regional District Okanagan-Similkameen in their grant application to the UBCM Community Preparedness Fund for Emergency Operations Centers and Training Program. The amount they've put forward as way of a grant is $133,800. The District of Summerland, as part of the Regional Emergency Program, would be partnering with the RDUS, the Village of Karamias, the towns of Princeton, Osoyoos, and Oliver to train, develop protocols for Regional Emergency Operations Center. The hiring of an emergency management expert consultant would be hired to assist with the development and delivery of the EOC, refresher training, a full-scale multiple jurisdiction exercise, website design, and enhancement of the mass notification implementation system that currently exists within the RDUS, but Summerland does not have a Summerland specific model. So the risk to us to partner with the RDUS is minimal to zero, and staff's recommendation is that council endorse that application.
Thank you, Glenn. Council, any questions? Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. So I noticed in the grant application that it talks about after a needs assessment, it seemed the Civic Ready, the RDUS's system, would be the preferred option. And so I also note that in the report, there's no financial implications, but would there not be any ongoing costs to maintain Civic Ready and to inform people to join and make people aware of it and that sort of thing? So I'm just wondering about the ongoing costs.
through the chair, part of this assessment will be to discover or to explore those costs. But the cost to us to apply for this grant is zero. So there may be future further costs to maintain that system. But at this time, I don't know what those would be. But to apply for the grant, there is no cost.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to bring the staff recommendation forward, if that is appropriate.
Okay, any questions of council that are on Zoom today? Okay, thank you, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That the municipality of the District of Summerland participate in a joint grant application with the RDOS to the UBCM Community Preparedness Fund Emergency Operations Centers and Training Program in the amount of $133,800. And that council endorse the regional district in Okanagan-Slocomin to apply for, receive, and manage grant funding on the District of Summerland's behalf.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Patton. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Council. On to 7.2, the 2020 financial statements, and Dave Svetlichny will be presenting this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So Canadian audit standards require that those with recognized authority have asserted that they have taken responsibility for the financial statements prior to the issuance of an audit report. Now, the district's auditors, BDO Canada LLP, have completed their audit work and are prepared to issue an unqualified opinion that the financial statements fairly represent the financial position of the District of Summerland as at December 31st, 2020. Once council has approved the statements, BDO will formally issue their opinion. Now, prior to handing today's presentation over to Mario Perotti, who's a partner with BDO Canada and the engagement partner for the district's audit, I wanted to briefly comment on the statements overall and at an extremely high level. The financial statements reflect a continued improvement in the financial position for the District of Summerland. Two financial indicators that I would like to highlight this afternoon are net financial assets and reserves. Net financial assets measure a municipality's ability to cover its financial liabilities with its financial assets at any given point in time. The district's 2020 financial position reflects net assets of $8.5 million, strengthen its position from the $4.3 million in net assets reported in 2019. District reserve funds at the end of 2020 totaled $29.3 million, which was an increase of $2.8 million over last year. This increase in reserve funds is primarily attributed to the district not spending budgeted funds on specific projects, along with the district receiving a $2.7 million COVID-19 grant from the province of BC, of which the district transferred $1.7 million into reserves for future use. So now I would like to call on Mr. Perotti to provide council with BDO's overall comments on the district's financial statements and their audit findings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Svetlichny, and thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council, for having me here today. I understand that you have a fairly full agenda, so I will walk you through a brief presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have on the financial statements themselves. In your package, you would have received the full set of the financial statements as well as my written report to council. If there's any questions after we run through the numbers that you have on those items, please feel free to ask them. But in the interest of time, I'm going to walk through the financial statement highlights. So when we look at the financial results this year, as was just mentioned, we saw that there was an improved growth and within the district's operating results. And we see our financial assets increase from $33 million to $39 million. And that is mainly in cash increase. Your receivables and other items affecting your financial assets remained the same. But we also saw your liabilities increase at year end from 13.6 million to 17.5 million. And one of the main increases why the liabilities went up is because of the extensions granted by the province of BC in terms of remitting property taxes to the ministry. And so those payments were made after year end, which would have drawn down some of the cash position as well as the liability. But as was spoken to, we did see that increase from 4.3 million up to 8.4 million in your net financial assets, which again assures you that you allows you to be more stable in your revenues going forward. In looking at your revenues, and I'll preface this by stating we're going to be doing a lot of comparison to the financial plan, but understanding that last year was a very different year, and because of that, you had to perform an amended COVID budget. The financial statements, though, measure the operating results against the original budget only. So that's why when you look at this, you're going to see some items, you're going to see some budget variances that will surprise you, but that's because the rest of the year you were comparing to the amended budget, not the original one. And so when we look at your revenues, you had $40 million of revenues this year versus 38.6 last year and an original budget of $48 million. The largest single item that was there that contributed to the revenue shortfall was in your government transfers and grants. Obviously last year there were projects that were delayed, there were and grants that didn't come through just because of the nature of the pandemic. But over and above that, you actually weathered the storm in terms of revenues in a pandemic year quite well, and we didn't see significant drops like we have in other communities. And looking at your revenues broken down by source, that $40 million in revenues, I wanted to highlight that taxation only forms 26% of your revenues. So what's happening is that you actually have a larger portion based on sales of service, and so your user fees is what's generating a lot of your revenues there. So that's actually quite good because it shows that you have a lower reliance on your property tax base and can control increases more because you aren't as heavily reliant as some other communities are. And when we look at the expenses and comparing budget to actuals, we had budgeted expenses of 9.8 million pre-COVID versus actuals of 6.5 million and 6.6 million in the prior year. Understanding that as COVID hit, there were cuts that were made, there was pivoting that happened, and so we did see across the board a lot of reductions in your expenses. The one item that I will highlight did increase is environmental services, and you were over budget there, and that's your landfill liability. So it wasn't necessarily that you went over budget on spending. Because of the changes in the assumptions that had to be used in calculating what your future landfill closure obligations are, the landfill liability increased by 1.8 million and is reflected in these statements. So it's not a today we went over budget by this, it's that we're projecting now that the landfill liability is higher. And the reason for the change was because interest rates plummeted. And so when we're projecting out what the closure is going to be in 30 plus years, we have to discount it using your current cost of borrowing, which when your borrowing falls to under 1%, creates an increased liability for you, just how we calculate discounted cash flows. So it's not necessarily that it's a real increase in the liability, it's just a change in your estimate. And so it's not that you were over budget per se. And this slide just touches on where you spend your money between labor, contracted services, materials, and supplies to give you an idea of how that 38 million is spent. Now, when we bring it all together, we came to an annual surplus for accounting purposes in the year of 6.5 million, in line with what you had last year. But it's important to remember that when we create our budget bylaw, we create a bylaw that is balanced to zero. And for accounting purposes, the biggest item that we look at is that in your budget bylaw, your capital projects are an expense, but in the financial statements, it's not. So this change in your financial position helps reconcile between your budget bylaw and your surplus for accounting purposes. If we take your annual surplus of 6.5 million, deduct your capital projects of 6.1 million, add back amortization, which is non-cash, we get to our change in net financial position of 4.1 million, which more closely resembles what your budget bylaw attempted to calculate. Now, I also want to preface here that that 4.1 million is after receiving the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant of $2.7 million. And if we back that out, you're left with $1.4 million is really what your surplus would have been, which is what you did normally budget to put into reserves year over year. So you can see that you were very close to what your intentions were in the budget bylaw, were it not for timing of grants when they were received and that sort of thing. So, and I'll also report that although we compared to the original budget on the financial statements, when we look at how you fared against your COVID budget, you were actually very close to your actual results to your COVID budget. Now, the next few slides I want to talk on, just because when we wrap it all up, we have an accumulated surplus of $126 million for the district. And when you look at it, that's a huge number to say, this is what my surplus is that I've accumulated. But it's important to break down what is there for council to be able to use in the future versus what isn't really there to spend. So as mentioned earlier, between your reserve funds, where you have your community works fund, which is restricted by contract, 2.8 million, plus your statutory reserves, you have total reserves that have limitations on how you can spend it of 5.2 million out of that 126. We then also have capital equity. So capital equity of 102 million. And what that number represents is what you've spent in the past on your infrastructure, on your buildings, on your community, less amortization and less any debt outstanding on it. Think of this as the equity in your home, the community of the District of Summerland. 102 million, again, that's not cash. And then we come to the current funds. The current funds is what is actually available for cash for council to spend and to transfer to future years. You have in your general fund $8 million, and then the remaining $7 million is spread out between water, sewer, and electrical funds, which those monies have to be spent on within those funds. So really, of that $126 million, you have $8 million in your unrestricted funds available for future years, which is about 20% of your overall budget, annual budget. So when looking at that 126 million, you can see that it is actually a modest surplus. And with that, I'll open it up for some questions on the numbers themselves.
Okay, council, any questions? Okay, seeing no hands raised, could I ask someone to bring forward the motion, please? Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That the 2020 audited financial statements for the District of Summerland be approved.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Patton. Any further discussion on this? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Svetlichny. And I'm sorry, I don't have your name here. Mr. Parodi, thank you very much.
Thank you. And if I may have one comment before I go, I do want to express a great deal of thank you to your finance team. They do a fantastic job in terms of making sure that they are ready for the audit, making sure that we're getting what we need in full access to the records. And when we did look at your internal controls, we had no recommendations to make in terms of improvements this year. And I felt that it was important for council to understand that those were our observations because you do have a strong team in place.
Great, thank you so much for stating that. Kudos to our team. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. On to 7.3, and again, this is Mr. Svetlichny for the 2021 tax rates bylaw.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council adopted the district's 2021 to 2025 five-year financial plan on February 26th of this year. This plan included a 1.65% property taxation revenue increase for 2021. Now, based on the district's overall assessments, residential properties will contribute 87.3%, or $8,157,000 of the total $9.34 million budgeted tax revenues in 2021. Businesses will contribute 9.2% of the total, with the remaining 3.5% coming from not-for-profits, farms, and industrial properties. The average residential property assessed at $592,123 will see a $23.37 increase in taxes over the previous year. The average commercial property assessed at $310,683 will see a $34.32 increase in taxes over the previous year. The proposed bylaw sets the property tax due date as July 2nd, 2021, which is in line with when it normally is here in the district. Now, in addition to the proposed tax rates bylaw in front of council, residents should be aware of the following two items. The first item is the change in the homeowner grant and how it's being administered. Effective for 2021, the province of BC has taken over administration of the province's homeowner grant program. Eligibility criteria has not changed. However, homeowners can no longer apply for their homeowner grant at Municipal Hall. They must apply directly to the province using the province's online system, or for those homeowners that do not own a computer, they can call the province's toll-free number. Homeowners are strongly encouraged to claim their homeowner grants as soon as the 2021 property tax notices are mailed out. The second item is to inform residents on the physical distancing measures that will be undertaken at Municipal Hall in light of the increased provincial COVID-19 restrictions. Starting on May 26th and lasting for the duration of property tax time, the district will be limiting the amount of people entering Municipal Hall. We'll be setting up a manned table directly as residents come into the main foyer in order to manage the flow of people. There may be instances where people are asked to line up outside and wait until such time as it's safe to enter the premises. And we thank everyone in advance for their patience. Property tax notices will be mailed out the week of May 24th. And accompanying the tax notices will be the 2021 tax insert, which provides residents with the numerous payment alternatives, amongst other important information. Residents are encouraged to review this insert and use an alternative payment method other than physically coming into Municipal Hall. We hope this will keep lineups and wait times to a minimum. And with that said, the attached 2021 tax rates bylaw is now ready for first three readings, as well as adoption. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. Just in respect to the homeowners grant and having to apply directly to the province, it seems a bit like fixing something that's not broken, but would you know the reason for that change? And will we put some, I imagine it'll create some confusion in the community. And so will we put some information in with our tax notices informing people what they must do to claim?
Through the mayor, I can speak to a couple of those items. As for the reason that the province is doing it, they are centralizing a lot of things now. Last year, in 2020, they centralized the tax deferment process because it is a provincial program. And now they're moving ahead with the homeowner grant. Again, it's a provincial program. And having it centralized, there are a lot of residents that own multiple homes, and this is by centralizing it, it's one way that the province can ensure that only one home is being claimed for the homeowner grant. So that would be answer to the first question. The second question, yes, we already have been as a district in our through our newsletter. We have some pamphlets, some sandwich boards in Municipal Hall. We are definitely trying to get the message out as we can to residents. We've put it on our Facebook page. Definitely trying to get the message out there that this is no longer. We at Municipal Hall are no longer allowed to accept those applications. So. This is, and through this meeting here, just one more avenue that we can try to get the message out to our residents.
Just follow up. Yeah. To me, the logical place would be with the TACNOS to include something with the tax notices themselves, though?
Yes, the tax insert that will be going out with the tax notices has a half-page section dealing with the homeowner grant and how residents can apply, the 1-800 number that they can call in case they don't have a computer as well. So yes, absolutely, it is in that insert.
Any other questions, Council? Councillor Trainer.
I'm sure my question will be covered in that question and answer sheet that you're going to include with the tax notices. But I just wanted to know, once a homeowner goes online and applies for their grant, then do they get, like, is it an instant printout that they would then bring to the district with them when they go to pay their taxes? It might be a bit early for you to know the answer to that, but I'm just curious about that process. My question's for David.
Thank you. And through the mayor, my understanding is once an individual or a property owner claims the homeowner grant, they will get a, what's the right terminology, like kind of like a receipt to say that they've submitted their grant. Homeowners do not need to bring that to Municipal Hall. When they come to Municipal Hall, or depending on how they're going to pay their property taxes, they would just claim whichever grant that they're claiming. They would just pay the difference, which shows up on the property tax notice. So our property tax notices, we provide 3 different columns. Column A is what if a resident is not claiming the grant. Column B is if they're claiming the regular $770 grant, and column C is if they're claiming the senior or the disabled grant of $1,045. So we as the district do not require them to show us anything. They would just make whichever payment they would require, and that would be it.
All right, if there are no more questions, I'll ask someone to bring forward first, second, and third reading and adoption. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That tax rate 2021 bylaw number 2021-017 be read a first, second, and third time. And 2, that the tax rate 2021 bylaw number 2021-017 be adopted.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Patton. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, now on to 7.4, quarterly update on procurement for Q1 2021, and this is for Karen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good afternoon, Council. This procurement report is prepared quarterly for Council information as an update on procurement activity valued at $250,000 or greater. In the first quarter of 2021, the existing Works Department service vehicle fleet was updated with expected delivery of the 5 replacement trucks within 6 months. The total cost was $521,473, which included 2 1.5-ton 4x4 dual wheel dump trucks, a 3/4-ton 4x4 service truck, and a 1.5-ton 4x4 dual wheel service truck. The second item was the Eisentalk outlet pipe replacement, construction and non-construction work. This is related to the feasibility of raising the dam, and it was awarded to KWL, who had done the previous stage of the replacement project. And finally, negotiations concluded and the final drawings were submitted mid-March for upgrades to the Summerland Arts and Cultural Center building in the value of $426,634. And that concludes my report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Questions, Council? All right. Could I have somebody bring forward the motion to receive for information, please? Councillor Holmes, seconder. Councillor Patton. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. And now for the biggest piece of our meeting today, 7.5 quarterly update on our strategic priorities. And of course, this is for the first quarter of 2021. And I will ask CAO Stat to introduce this.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm actually really excited to start in on this today with council, and of course the whole senior management team will participate in this. I'll start with the slide deck here, Karen, actually, if we want to load that up. And the first slide, just as that starts getting loaded up, will be about council's strategic priorities, and there are 6 of them, and I'll just mention what they are right now. Infrastructure investment, good governance, community resilience, alternative energy, active lifestyles, and downtown vibrancy. And the intent of the exercise for quarterly reporting is to be able to report into council on these strategic priorities, and to do that with a certain sort of rhythm. And so there's always a good line of sight for council on what we're working on, and of course, a good reporting structure from the senior management team into council on the effort that's being maintained to achieve these priorities. I'll go to the next slide. So this slide here is sort of a breakdown under those broad headings that I talked about. And there's a number of different sort of sub-priorities at the project level that we are working on. You'll notice some of the squares in this slide are red. Those are just some additional updates and additions that council had made back in October of 2020. And I just wanted to sort of frame out how today's discussion is going to go. We do have about an hour and a half for it. And what we'll be doing is each senior management team member will be discussing a slide associated with each one of these priorities. And so we'll sort of plow our way through these various priorities, and we'll talk about of course, the description briefly, the activities to date, and then the next steps that we'll be working on. And at the end of the slide presentation, we've also put together a little bit of a sort of dashboard that we can evolve over time. That's good reference piece for council also in terms of where things are at on a quick reference basis. And so what I think we'll start right in on is the first priority, 1.1, and that will be over to Chris Johnson to start in on for council. And I think what we'll do, just given the time we have for this and the number of slides, we'll probably move along at a pretty good clip, but it will definitely answer any questions as council sees fit on a per slide basis, and then move on to the next slide and so forth. So with that, we will turn it over to Chris, and you can go right ahead there, Chris.
Thanks, Graham. Good afternoon, council. So priority 1.1 is asset management. So there's been lots of progress on our asset management journey to date since we started in 2018. We've got our inventory in place, our policy and strategy, which were adopted and put into place in 2019. And we've created a steering committee that was meeting monthly prior to COVID, and we've sort of lost some momentum, but we're looking to get that back on track here shortly to help move the initiatives that are identified in the strategy forward. Last year, we brought forward a new business case template and a project prioritization framework that we used for our financial plan. And next steps that we're looking to move forward is improving our data quality and our tools through our GIS, as well as 3 of us will be attending a level of service workshop with Asset Management BC that we were successful on a funding application through them, which will be in May and June this year. And then later this year, we want to bring sort of the first annual update to council on our asset management strategy and where we're at in our roadmap, and forecast forward where we're going from here. So with that, if there's any questions from council.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes? No? Will I be able to see the, yes. if you have a question, council that are joining us by Zoom, please just unmute your mic and begin. Oh, never mind. I can see you now. Okay. Looks like we don't have any questions on priority 1.1. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, 1.2 is the 10-year capital plan for road and water main. So with this, the district was successful in receiving a funding to complete this. Basically, it's going to look at these two asset categories and look at setting out a detailed plan for the next 10 years on replacement and upgrades for the roads and water mains within the district. Sorry, if you can advance the slide, I think we're still on 1.1.
Thanks for your patience, Chris. We're just getting the next slide up.
Yep. Perfect, thanks. So the goal of this 10-year capital plan is to look at other factors such as level of service and risk, as well as condition, and set out a detailed 10-year plan for which water mains will be replaced within the district and which roads will be upgraded. For the roads sections, this will be utilizing the road condition data that we gathered in 2019, which is another priority on this list. I believe it's 1.5 that I'll speak to in a little bit. But it's basically to help lay out where we should be spending our money and help make informed decisions on these bits of infrastructure, so that we're getting away from the reactive decision making and repairing the worst first, and looking to invest our funds wisely into these two assets. So with that, if there's any questions on this one.
Just on the presentation slides, if any of the council participating by Zoom have a question, if you wouldn't mind just speaking up.
Okay, so I guess we're good to go on priority 1.2, Chris.
Okay,
sorry. Sorry. Yeah, so we're finished with priority 1.2. Okay, and then now, so we can head on to priority 1.3.
Perfect, thank you, Madam Mayor. 1.3 is the Giants Head Road and Water Main System improvements. So this dates back, I think it was in 2017, we looked at the initial detailed design of this full reconstruction of 2.6 kilometers of Giants Head Road from Harris Road to Hilborn Street. Over the last few years, we've tried unsuccessfully at this point for grant applications or funding to assist with the proceeding with this project. However, we are continuing to seek any possible grant opportunities that may arise and may apply to this type of work. Last year, we brought, when we updated council on this discussion, there was direction to look at some alternative road improvement strategies that we could pursue potentially for Giants Head Road, as sort of short-term options to deal with the road in its current state, as it is in quite poor condition, and look at completing the water main improvements at a later date. So staff is working on determining what those potential road improvement options would be, and we're looking to report back to council in the third quarter of this year. At that time, we'd be looking to get direction on whether we move forward with a short-term road option, or if we look at borrowing options to complete the full reconstruction of this 2.6 kilometer stretch of Giants Head Road. And then based on that, we'd then be looking at tendering and constructing that work later this year and into 2022. So with that, if there's any questions on Giants Head Road.
council members on Zoom please speak up? Okay, Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, just a question on the timeline. This being, it's been a priority from day one, and I'm just wondering how you come up with the timelines.
As far as the next steps, Councillor Holmes?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so I guess with that, we're looking, so I guess the initial design didn't look at the upstream system separation for this project. So that is sort of the next step, is to complete the detailed design on the upstream separation, as well as looking at the short-term road improvement options, and then coming to council in Q3 to look at direction on, do we proceed with the short-term road improvements and get that completed end of this year into 2022, or are we looking at borrowing the full $7 million that's been identified for this full project cost and moving forward with the full reconstruction option? So that's the timelines that we'll be looking at in this year in Q3 to determine which option we're moving forward, or if we're just going to still continue as we are now, looking for seeking further grant applications and funding opportunities for this work.
Yeah, just to follow up then, I guess my point is, if we knew, I don't know how much work is required to look at the short-term options, but if we knew those in advance, and we knew, and if we decided that's the route we're going to go, then maybe all the other things that are coming around the same time might not be necessary, or not so urgent anyway.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Councillor Holmes, I think that was in one of our update discussions. I believe it was last year. That's where we I guess it doesn't typically make sense to not consider the underground infrastructure and do a full reconstruction of a roadway such as this when you do have the aging water mains within the ground. However, it is an option, and it isn't one that we initially identified and brought specifically forward to council. However, we did at that time last year and said, if funding and looking at this long-term solution is an issue, there is always the alternative to look at a short-term plan and a short-term solution, and deal with the water infrastructure at a later date, understanding that whatever investment you make in the road now is going to be ultimately ripped up and replaced when the water main work does occur. So yeah, all I can say is we're looking to bring that forward here later this year and get some direction from council.
Any other questions, council?
I do have one.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson.
Thanks. When it comes to upstream water system separation, that would be things not on Giants Head Road. But what about downstream? Would replacing all of the water infrastructure along Giants Head Road then be allow us to basically split the system for everything on that front bench and everything on the top side of Giants Head Road as well? Like, is that, it's a significant amount of farmland, and I guess I'm just wondering if that part of it will also be included in the modeling, looking at just how much pressure it would end up taking off of our other out of our water treatment facility.
Yeah, so this does look, I'm not sure exactly how far down the front bench. This will separate everything that feeds off of this 2.6 kilometer stretch of Giants Head Road. And it is the next largest area of system separation that's been identified in our water master plan. At the end of, at the south end of Giants Head Road, that's where this irrigation system dead ends. In the domestic, there's a different pressure zone beyond that. So it would be everything along this. It would potentially set up for future separation as you move to the east, down onto the front bench from this. But however, the scope of this work is just along the Giants Head Road.
Do you have a follow-up question, Councillor Carlson?
I don't. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, council? Okay, so we're done with that one and on to priority 1.4.
I believe this one's over to Jeremy Storvold. If he's on, oh, there he is.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just to refresh council's memory on this project, this is to bring the electric utility in line with industry practice as far as our voltage goes and reduce our material costs, increase our system capacity, better resiliency for our customers and for the system. And to date, we have applied for 3 different grants. We've been unsuccessful with 2 of those, and we're awaiting results for the 3rd, and that's the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program Intake 2. So we're still waiting on that one, and fingers crossed for that. But coming up next month, we will be discussing the energy strategy, and as part of that report, the voltage conversion project is in there with the other projects, and we can speak with council at that time about prioritizing this project and what the economic benefits are. So at this point, the next steps are wait to see what the results are for our last grant application, and go over those that energy strategy with council next month.
Thank you. Any idea on when we might expect those results from the 2nd intake?
There's been it was supposed to be at the end of the year, and we haven't had an update from the funder on any dates for that.
So the end of 2020, you mean?
End of 2021.
Oh, 2021. Okay, thank you. Any other questions, council? Okay. Oh, Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question through to our Director of our Electrical Utility. So in the meantime, prior to doing this, a full-on voltage conversion, in new subdivisions and new development areas, are you able to then put in the proper transformers and stuff like that today? And then would that tie into a voltage conversion for the future?
Great question through the chair. Yes, all new construction that we do right now, Councillor, is built to the 25 kV voltage standard. It's not energized to 25,000 volts. It's only energized to 8,000 volts because that's our system voltage today. But all of the equipment we install to date currently is built to accept the 25 kV voltage when we eventually do convert. So we are slowly replacing the system through attrition, through service requests, through new development, Hunters Hill, for instance, all built to 25,000 volts. So we won't have to go back and rebuild any of that new infrastructure.
Thank you so much.
Question?
Please go ahead, Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah. So when we have our energy strategy discussion later, will we also talk about some of the numbers for sort of a capital reserve, like in the other utilities we put in, well, for water, I think it was like 5% in rate increases in a row, specifically to go into capital funding, capital reserve. And we don't have a similar program. We haven't done anything like that for the electrical utility, which, when we had our meetings, and it might have been previous council, where there was, a fairly just as large, if not larger, infrastructure deficit in the electrical utility. So are we going to talk about addressing that in our strategy meeting coming up?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, Councillor, we did have that infrastructure deficit, and we did have a conversation around our budget and how much money we're putting away towards asset management. I believe it was at our last during our last budget cycle, and we did. Council did choose to put away $400,000 roughly per year towards our asset management program. So there was some decisions made there, just to refresh your memory. And the energy strategy does not include an analysis of the electric utility budget and how the assets are managed. That will be done through our asset management program as we're working our way through that.
That'll be, so that's sort of coming up, because I was looking at an earlier email. It says currently the district does not set aside a specific rate increase for asset management of its electrical assets like it does for the water and the sewer. So that kind of made me think, maybe this one isn't really being addressed the same way, and it's time to do that. So you're suggesting that not at this next meeting, but in the future? Or I was a little bit distracted there, maybe.
Yeah, through the chair. I'm not sure what email you're referring to, Councillor, but perhaps our CFO can also sort of reiterate what I'm saying. I believe we are putting aside $400,000, just over $400,000 per year towards an asset management fund. I don't know if the fund is sort of a separate line item on the budget or if it's just rolled into our surplus. But we did, council did decide to put aside some amount of money for that every year, and we have been accumulating that.
Is it sufficient?
We'll know that, the answer to that, as we get further and further down our asset management program. We do have some work to do on our asset conditions and to update that report that was done in the past on our asset health. So once we get down the road on the asset health indices, we'll be able to see, do we have enough in reserves to address our infrastructure deficit going on into the future?
It looks like maybe our director of finance here has some comments. No?
Through the chair, my computer screen just went blank. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. To answer your question, Councillor Barkwell, the comment that was made, Council may recall that when we were looking at the 2020 budget, there was a lot of work that had been done up to that point on the asset management side of things, and specifically around water and sewer. Council did make a resolution and a decision that for the next 5-year period, so from 2020 to 2024, that water rates would increase 5% every year, specific to asset management, and sewer would be 3.5% every year for sewer reserves. When we came and we looked at the electrical utility, there was a decision made that for 2020 and 2020 alone, 3.5% rate increase, which equated to $404,000, was designated to go into an asset management reserve. However, there was no decision made looking into the future. There were a few reasons for that. One of the main reasons was the district was still looking at our electric utility inventory and trying to get some better numbers around what our deficit truly was, and the work has been continuing on through that process. So what Jeremy's saying there is, as we're looking towards 2022 budget, this will be brought back to council, and we'll kind of have those discussions in regards to asset management and putting money away on an annual basis into reserves. I hope that answers your question, Councillor.
So while it's not part of the energy strategy, it will be part of our next budget discussions in the next cycle.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Jeremy, could you just remind me why we were turned down on the two grants, the one for 6.6 million and the other for 684,000?
Yes, through the chair, the January 2019 application for the first intake of the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program grant They did not provide an explanation on why that was denied. However, for the October 2020 application for the Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program, we did have a follow-up meeting with the funder, and they received so many applications that it was over applied for to the tune of 5 times or something. I'd have to check through my emails, but they had so many applicants, they were denying most applicants. So that's why we didn't receive that one. And I believe we're getting some phone calls in with them and trying to have some conversations around helping Summerland and getting our grants our grant applications some attention. So hopefully for this last application that we have in for 1.6 million, we'll receive some close attention by them. But the short answer to the question is they don't provide us with a letter saying this is why you didn't receive it. They just say you didn't receive it. And when you speak to them and try to get a feel for why, they don't really give you any detail or notes from the evaluators. At least I haven't had success in that.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeremy.
Any other questions, Council? Okay, thank you, Jeremy. On to priority 1.5.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So 1.5 is the road condition assessment. This initial assessment was completed in September of 2019. District received the results in January of 2020, and this was brought to council last November. This is basically a subjective condition assessment of all paved roadways within the district. By utilizing a third-party contractor that we did that completes these with an automated vehicle, it's something that can be repeated easily in the future to assess and to see and determine if we're trending in the right direction as far as improving the conditions of a roadway or not. And so this data will be used to help us set out the plan in the 10-year road and water main capital plan, as well as guide decisions for our capital priorities through our budget process. And so what we have is an annual subscription through what's a program called Street Logics, which allows us to utilize this data as far as looking at any sort of budget scenarios, different replacement options, costs, and determining and assessing possible budget or repair strategies that we can consider in the future. So the big takeaway from this is something that's repeatable, that we can go back and see if we're trending and improving our road conditions as we move forward.
Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering, is this information public?
No, it is not. We have looked at the possibility of taking the pavement condition index scores from this and including that on our public facing GIS. If you were to click on a road section, this is a piece of information that we could provide or could display, but at this time we do not.
I have a question for you, Chris, that comes under the next steps. And my question is, moving forward, rather than having a separate 10-year road plan and a water main plan or waterworks plan, are the two going to be combined in a road and water main capital plan? Or is that something that already exists and I'm just unaware?
I guess, sorry, thank you, Madam Mayor. Right now we have separate general capital and our water capital budgets. So yeah, this is to look at combining or at least reviewing those assets in conjunction with one another. Because whenever we're doing water main replacement, we're ripping up the road, and it makes sense to do usually do full road reconstruction at that time. One of the bigger takeaways from it will be, we'll identify what water mains we anticipate in dealing with in that 10-year period. And so then we can focus on the other roadways and know that we're not looking to invest in the underground infrastructure in that 10-year period. And so those roads would be, I guess, deemed eligible for just surface improvements versus full reconstruction that we would see during an underground repair scenario. So it is sort of to use in the background as a one plan that amalgamates or that incorporates those two assets together to make sure that we're not going to repair a road and then 2 or 3 years later end up ripping it up to do water main replacement. So it'll be in the background to guide the separate water capital and general capital budgets.
Good. I think that's an excellent way to move forward. Thank you. Any other questions, Council? Those on Zoom? Okay. Thanks for that one, Chris. And now on to priority 1.6.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this one's Eneas Creek strategy. So back in 2018, we had a high flow event that created a bunch of issues along this drainage corridor. We've still got some emergency measures in place around Garnet Ave and Tingley. And we've been working with the province to obtain the Water Sustainability Act Section 11 approvals to move forward with the repairs and construction. We've also applied for a couple of grant applications through the Structural Flood Mitigation Program and have not been successful, and have recently, through discussions with the province on those applications, have put in an application for the flood mitigation planning program to look at an Eneas Creek flood mitigation plan. So initially, following the high flow event, we did an assessment of the creek and identified a number of potential either sections that had been damaged or potential areas of concern. But there are a number of challenges as far as trying to increase the capacity of this corridor. And that is one question that always came up in the structural flood mitigation applications, where the works that we were proposing was just to mainly repair these 6 sections or these 6 priority projects that have been identified and are shown on the figure on this slide, but didn't look at how can we increase the capacity of this drainage corridor. So the province would like us to target a 1 in a 200-year event, which if this were an open field channel and there weren't residential houses, for instance, along the corridor, that may be an option. So we're going to sort of take a step back and hopefully get the approval for that planning fund and go through that process to determine for this creek what is the ultimate design capacity that the province is in agreement with. So then we can move forward once we finish these 6, if you want to call them repair projects, look at other projects and enhancements along the corridor to increase that flood capacity and hopefully mitigate any risk of future flooding during high flow years. So next steps that we're looking at is we expect the Section 11 approval to come sometime between now and the 3rd quarter of this year. And then we would be looking at moving forward with the tender of these 6 projects. Prior to doing so, or I guess once we've tendered the projects, prior to awarding those construction contracts, we'd be looking to come back to council to confirm the funding and priority of them. Currently in our capital budget, we assumed getting the structural flood mitigation grants, which were 100% funding, which we weren't successful on. We have confirmed that we are eligible for some disaster financial assistance monies through EMBC, which would fund a portion of these projects, but there would be a portion that the district would need to fund. So once we've got our approvals and tender and get the actual construction costs before we award, we would be looking to get some direction on what's the total construction cost we're looking at, what DFA funds are we eligible for, what portion is remaining for the district to fund, and set some order of priority and confirmation of funds for those works. And the last item on here is pending the approval of the flood mitigation planning funds to go forward with that Eneas Creek flood mitigation plan in 2022. There's also another aspect during the initial flood event when we were working with the province and with the residents along this, was to look at some sort of long-term strategy where the district, province, and private property owners were working together to coordinate or make sure there was a coordinated effort on any improvements that private property owners wanted to go ahead with. To date, that's where this flood mitigation plan will come into a play. I think a lot better at this point. Private property owners are required to apply on their own through Front Counter BC to get approvals and get their Section 11 approvals to go forward with any work. We do have the assessment study that they can refer to and get some recommendations on any improvements they are looking to make on their property. But there is no dedicated resource from the district to look at sort of being that middleman between the province and the property owners. So that is one aspect that will continue on in the future that wasn't noted on this slide.
Questions, council? Anyone on Zoom? I just have one, Chris. Could you verify that the project that's marked 1.1 is the Peach Orchard Trail or the Centennial Trail that goes down along Peach Orchard Road?
1.1, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question through to our Director of Public Works and Utilities. So many years ago, we were instructed by dam safety, I guess, to reduce the levels in the Garnet, in all our dams, I believe. And if we were able to, if there was more capacity to hold back water, would we be able to control these flood events any better than what is happening today? Because of the level had to be dropped, I guess we're discharging more water, through the spillway, so to speak. Is that an option to increase the capacity and be able to hold back more water in a flood event type situation?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Van Elfen. So our normal operating level is held below, I guess if you want to call it a full pool level. That being said, based on the current spillway elevation, we do still most years spill for a period of time out of Garnet Dam. One option could be to raise that dam and increase that capacity, but I believe between Eneas and Garnet, we currently do store our maximum license volume on that watershed. So there would be a process to look at trying to increase the storage capacity and raise the elevation of Garnet Dam. So in short, it could help somewhat. You would still potentially, depending on the year, still have some periods where you are spilling and you are having uncontrolled flows. We do constantly monitor this throughout the winter months, making sure that we've dropped it low enough to allow for that storage. And I think it just comes down to being in tune more with the weather conditions, with the snowpack, and managing the water levels as best we can.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Hello.
Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah. Following up on Councillor Van Elfen's discussion on the Garnet system, is the Eneas Dam emptied at the end of the season, or in the winter, or at any time during the year, so that it could absorb some of the runoff in the spring by filling again?
I believe it is, but the volume compared to the Garnet Reservoir is quite a bit smaller, like significantly smaller. I believe it's in the around 150, whereas Garnet is over 250 or 2,500. So like the proportion, it's just a small percentage. But yeah, throughout most of the year it is held full. I don't think we lower it that much, but most dams we do lower them in the fall through the winter to allow for the runoff.
Yeah, I know that most dams, it's pretty hard to really make a dent in the flood, but
Yeah.
you know, anything could help. I thought that maybe we should be doing that. And you know, I don't know, it's a complicated question, I understand, but I thought I'd heard that the ENIAS wasn't being lowered, so it wasn't contributing at all.
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's held fairly constant. It is a small volume. We will be looking at the potential of investing in that dam or decommissioning this year. So that will be a discussion that will come to council in 2021.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, council? Okay, we'll go on to priority 1.7.
Just a comment, if I may, Madam Mayor?
Yes, please, Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a comment. I live along this creek, and this year it doesn't look like an issue. I don't know for sure. I know there's still snowpack to come down, but we've been in one way, very fortunate, and then blessed in another way that we did have some rain this last weekend, thank goodness. But doesn't look like it's one of those potential flood years, but it's not an exact science, and I commend our staff, monitoring the levels on that dam to the best of their abilities. Again, we're being held hostage by Mother Nature, and it's not like, again, not an exact science. So again, my hat off to staff for trying to do the due diligence and do the best they can with what we have. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Van Alphen. And CAO Stad is acknowledging that. So I'm sure that there'll be more at the senior management meeting tomorrow. So thank you very much, Councillor Van Alphen. On to 1.7, Chris.
1.7 is the Eisentalk dam upgrade. So this is the low-level outlet pipe replacement and potential raising of the dam structure. So this was initially identified back in 2013 when the pipe with some leakage was discovered of infiltration leaking into the pipe. Since then, there's been a few attempts to seal off the face of the dam, and we've since completed the detailed design of replacing that outlet pipe. We just received word that we were successful on a funding application through the Adaptation, Resilience, and Disaster Mitigation Program for $1.8 million towards this project, which is great news. So we're looking at finalizing the tender documents here in the next few weeks and getting this project out to tender in order to complete construction this year. So during construction, we'll do a geotechnical investigation at the base of the excavation to determine the feasibility of raising the dam in the future. So next year we'll look at the design of the spillway upgrade, and then following that, if it's feasible, completing the design of raising the dam structure itself.
Questions, council? Okay, that looks good. Chris, on to 1.8.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 1.8 is the Trout Creek Flume project. So this is a replacement of the concrete flume structure from Trout Creek to our Summerland reservoir that's just upstream of our water treatment plant. This has been an identified priority for a number of years, and we continue to seek grants for this project. We were unsuccessful on the ICIP grant in 2018, reapplied in 2020, and are still awaiting word on that one. The latest update is that expected announcements are going to occur in spring of this year, but exact dates haven't been identified. So this is about a $5.9 million project to replace the concrete flume with an underground pipe system and to upgrade our intake, which is shown here on the slide, with one that meets the regulatory requirements for a intake and fish screening requirements that are associated with that.
Any questions, council?
Yeah, I've got a quick one here.
Please go ahead, Councillor Barkwill.
It sounds like because the intake doesn't meet regulatory requirements, it's the higher priority here of this package of the intake and the flume replacement. How much is the intake versus how much is the flume replacement?
Just going from memory, the intake itself, I believe it is a small percentage. It's in the order of 10 to 15% of the project. So, it's say around 500,000 versus the remaining 5.4 million that's required for the rest of because it's about 1.4 kilometers of flume that we would be replacing with underground pipe.
Could the pipe just lay in the flume and be done cheaper that way?
That's for the majority of the sections. That's what we're looking to do, is to utilize that as the foundation for the pipe and then burying it.
And it's still that much money. Okay.
Yeah, it's large size, high density polyethylene pipe that we need to use for this. So it's fairly expensive. That being said, we're fingers crossed that we're successful on the funding application, which is for 73.3% of the project.
Any other questions? On to 1.9.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 1.9 is the organic processing facility. This one has been discussed at council a few times over the last couple of years. We were successful in receiving a 2/3 grant to move ahead with this facility itself, which is about $1.6 million in funding. The design is almost complete, and we're looking to move into the tender stage here shortly, and then begin construction and wrapping that up by the end of this year. And then looking into 2022 to incorporate the removal of food scraps that'll be used in this organic processing facility in 2022.
If we're not successful in the grant application for the curbside collection program rollout, then the 100% of that will be borne by the district?
Yes, it would. A large portion of that is looking at providing residents with a small kitchen catcher that would be associated with this, as well as additional curbside carts, either to upsize their green waste to handle the food scraps and to adjust their garbage accordingly. So if we're unsuccessful in the rollout application, then we would bring back to council the scope of what we're looking to do if the district is to fund this 100%. A big benefit of this application was to provide that added benefit to each resident with some of that infrastructure for their facility, for their houses.
Right. Thank you. Any other questions, council? Okay. On to priority 1.10.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 110 is the watershed management plan. So this one is not a large dollar value project, but it is obviously of high importance. And looking at our source water for the district, first step is to complete an update of our assessment of our watershed in 2021, which we recently received $22,000 towards the $30,000 project from OBWB. And then in 2022, we'll be looking to create a source water protection plan, which will identify a number of mitigation measures and protection priorities that are involved around the different activities that occur in our watershed. And then and moving forward to look at periodic evaluation of those to ensure that our watershed remains there for us in the future and isn't compromised as we move forward.
Councillor
I'll speak
Barkwill.
first since Councillor Traynor hasn't turned her microphone on. I was thinking about how important this is now and how it is a result of how our world has changed. Because when I was young, you couldn't get to Eisentalk unless you had a key to get to the road. And now, you know, they're logging right beside it. And it's the same everywhere in our watershed. It's just a different, it's so completely different than what it used to be. And, you know, the time was yesterday, I guess, is to protect our interests for the watershed because everything's changing. The use is changing. There's more fires, and we know what fires can do to your watershed. The logging, that the rate that the runoff is so much faster now with the logging. So let's keep this as a real high priority, I guess is my comment.
Thank you.
May I make a comment as well? Oh,
yes,
sorry.
Of course. Go ahead, Councillor Trainer.
Yeah, I share the thoughts that Councillor Barkwell just shared as well. And also I wanted to know, once we have this assessment done, is this something that we would share with the province? And if we come up with, you know, mitigation strategies, are they going to listen? And I'm kind of thinking about like where they allow logging to go and things like that. Because it's great if we do this plan, but where does it go after this?
Yeah, great question, Councillor Trainer. So they are definitely one of the stakeholders that'll be at the table through the preparation of this plan and the assessment. So looking at the user groups, residents, and agencies that are involved. So the intent is to have collaboration and buy-in from all parties to determine how we can give and take within our watershed to make sure that our rights are protected and looked after, but still allow some of those other activities to occur, because as Councillor Barkwell said, we can't just lock the gate and not allow anyone up there. There's other activities and other interests that will always be occurring, whether it's timber or mining or just recreational activities as well. So but the province and those agencies will be at the table and part of these discussions.
Okay, good. Just as long as they get to see the results of this and it's taken seriously. Thanks.
Yep.
Chris, is one of the agencies or groups that will be represented at the table the Okanagan Nation Alliance?
I guess we haven't identified the full range, but yeah, that would definitely be extended out to the different First Nation groups to determine who should be at the table as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. So when you're talking about watershed residents, I'm not sure who that is exactly, but I imagine most of them would live outside municipal boundaries. And so how would you connect with those people? Would you be working with the RDUS, or how does that work?
That's correct, Councillor. Yeah, we'd be working with the RDOS on this as well. So that's where I mentioned it's not a large dollar value project, but it's of high importance, and it's fairly intensive as far as the collaboration and getting those different groups together to collaborate on this.
Any more questions? Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, just a comment, I guess, is to me, I guess echoing what Councillor Barkwell is saying, is the challenge is getting all these different groups actually caring about our water, because it's not theirs, it's not their drinking water, so to speak. So that's I think that's going to be the ongoing challenge. Thanks.
Okay, priority 1.11.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 111 is the perpetual slide. So we recently reported to Council on one of the initiatives that were identified in the initial Golder report in 2015 to replace the water main along Canyon View Road. So with that direction, we're moving forward with the finishing the design and tender now to have that constructed later this year. We've also brought forward the borehole investigation results in February from the 4 boreholes that were drilled in the slide. Unfortunately, that were inconclusive to date, but are investigating other options such as INSAR for monitoring and trying to determine the causes and the impacts of the slide, not just in this local area where we're seeing the settlement, but perhaps uphill beyond the limits that we're currently monitoring. There's 3 other recommendations listed on here from the 2015 report that don't have timelines associated with them, but are priorities that we would need to look at moving forward in future years. But for this year, we're looking at, like I said, the water main replacement and looking at other INSAR options or monitoring options for the slide, as well as working with the Okanagan Nation Alliance and the ad hoc Trout Creek Steering Committee on improving fish habitat within Trout Creek downstream of the slide. So this is something the ONA is leading, and it's looking at a section from the west of the Highway 97 bridge to the mouth of the gorge, and potentially re-meandering that section of creek that was diked and regraded as basically a straight shot to the lake, and creating better fish habitat in that location. And part of that is going to be, right now, is planning for a sedimentation basin to capture the sediment that comes out of the perpetual slide. So they're working with us as well to look at any possible option solutions at the slide itself to mitigate the amount of material that's coming into the creek, because that would be the most likely the most cost-effective solution moving forward. But to date, we haven't identified what that is.
Questions, Council? Councillor Van Elfen.
Just a comment, Madam Mayor, it'd be nice, I'd like to see the future plans for the meandering of the creek west of the bridge. I know our neighbors to the south have done a sockeye release in that creek, and even in early December prior to runoff, the creek looks like it's mocha in color continuously. Compare it to Eneas Creek where it's very clean. So I'm hoping that this meandering and collecting of the silt may help clear the creek to some degree. So just a comment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, on to priority 1.12.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 112 is the Deer Ridge Sewer. So back in 2019, a 75% design was completed to see how the gravity sewer system could be extended up into the Deer Ridge area from Cartwright, where it currently is now. Now that with that 75% design in hand, we're now looking at sewer options for the eco village that in and around the solar site where this trail passes, or sorry, where this alignment for the sewer passes, which is basically following the flume trail for the majority of this alignment shown on the slide. Part of the discussion to get this sewer into Deer Ridge will also be looking at the undeveloped lands and the developers and landowners of those parcels to determine possible financial contributions to this project, as well as looking at the potential for a local area improvement for the existing residents that are just serviced off septic and having them connect to the gravity system as well. So those are sort of the next steps in the process in conjunction with looking at options for the eco village site.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'll be on the next slide, Madam Mayor.
All right. Are there questions on this slide about the Deer Ridge sewer?
Yes, I have one question, and I think I know the answer, but still, it's worth asking, I think. I note that at the end of the municipal land, where it starts in yellow, it leaves the flume right away. Well, it's not really a right away, I guess, or a flume right away for flume only, and goes between the properties on Morrow and the properties on Sunset, instead of going out to Morrow and going straight up. And that's really looks like it would be difficult it's very steep, and you'd be going right through two people's yards, one on either side. It's, is that, and I'm trying to figure out, why would you do that instead of going straight out to Morrow? Because the other properties are picked up from Sunset. Is it because of you want to maintain the slope? And is it really going to, how closely is that being looked at as far, the route in that section? Because it looks like it'd be a real difficult area to cut through compared to the road.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Barkle. Yeah, that was the purpose of the exercise in 2019, was to confirm a gravity alignment for this. So based on the slope of the pipe and the cover that needs to be maintained, initially I thought the same thing, that we could get out to Morrow Avenue and go up there, but going that route, we lose cover and aren't able to maintain a gravity option out to there. So part of it was talking to all of the property owners as far as service connection locations and this alignment to see if it would be possible. So it does appear to be possible, but it is the route that we would have to go if we would like to get gravity sewer into that area.
So the individuals on Morrow would have to pump, I guess. Which asks me, and it reminds me of another question. So all the people in Deer Ridge, have they been sort of canvassed and about their feelings on this? I mean, and know that it's a possibility. I'd hate to, like, one person on Morrow apparently spent recently $70,000 to replace their septic system. And if somebody's sort of sitting on that bounce, they might be tempted to wait a little bit and see how things work out versus spend $70,000 to repair a septic system when a sewer might be available in 2 years. So do we know that, have they been, what is the communication with the Deer Ridge residents been?
Yeah, so during the design process, they were made aware of this potential and that the design was being completed, and each resident was contacted, and the majority of I believe we had reached to look at servicing options for their property specifically. So they're aware, but timing was not confirmed based on the costs, and whether it's a local improvement or a district funded project, that hadn't been determined yet. So the next step, or where they'll actually really be, where we'll know if they're interested or not, will be through the local improvement area process. But they were made aware during the detailed design that this is something that we were looking to confirm if it was possible, and to bring forward through that process in the near future, but that it would still need the majority of residents to be on board with that, as the cost would be assigned to them.
Any sense of the feeling of the residents that you'd get your 50% plus one, or maybe not best to speculate, or what?
Yeah, I think a lot of them were like the idea of connecting to sewer, but we didn't have costs associated with that at the time. So that would obviously be a major factor in their decision.
All right, thank you.
Other questions, Council? Chris, I just have one question, and that is on the map that where it shows the green portion that starts at Cartwright and comes up Taylor Place. Yep. Is that the start on Cartwright? Is that the start of the connection to what we're calling the Deer Ridge sewer?
That's correct.
Okay, and it's in green because?
Yeah, good question. So this was taken from, I believe, one of the solar site council meetings, and it was to show the green portion is the section that's required to service Taylor Place. The blue portion was the section that crosses the district properties, and the yellow and the orange were in the Deer Ridge area.
Good, that makes sense. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so it looks like, Chris, you're off the hot seat now. Thank you so much for bringing us this quarterly update. We've been asking as a council, probably the last term, council was asking for these, so I really, really appreciate them. Thank you.
Thanks.
I think before we go on to our priority twos, I will call a 7-minute break, leading us up to 3 o'clock. So we'll see everybody at 3 o'clock.